Before it starts, oh my lord, it's going
Not
live.
much.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I was in the other session. I had to rush over to this one, and we were having a conversation with Alexander, but now I'm having a conversation with Sylvie. Absolutely delighted to meet you. I know you're
Same
from
here.
Argentina, sitting in Estonia.
That's correct. That's right. Yes, I'm from Argentina and our company is located in Estonia. It's a
Right.
pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely delighted. I'm sorry we couldn't have a chat a little bit
Yeah, we
before,
couldn't talk before.
but I'm absolutely certain you speak at least three different languages, probably more.
No, I actually speak two languages only, like really speak two languages.
Right. So it's Spanish and English, would that be correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Brilliant, wonderful. Which is why you talk about multilingual content strategies. This is your obsession. This is what you do all day, every day.
Every day. Yes, every single day. That's correct. Even though I only speak two languages, we actually help clients with a lot of languages.
Mhm.
So that's why we call it multilingual. Even though, we work with people from all over the world to be able to provide this. Some clients actually need to speak more than two languages. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the kind of things. I mean, obviously, I'm English, but I also speak French, and I find that once you've got the second language, other languages tend to be slightly easier to at least get a grip on. And one of the problems with multilingual content is seeing or being able to understand what it is we're looking at. Um,
well,
Go ahead.
yeah, well, actually, even though that's right, once you speak two languages, it's pretty much easier to learn new languages. Multilingual content strategies are absolutely different based on each language. Each language
Brilliant.
is, their whole thing. They have their own cultures, customs, and a lot of other things that define them. That's why you have to treat each language separately. We can't just use one same thing for everything. And that's what I'll be talking about more today.
Brilliantly. I love the way you've so kindly put me right back where I should have been, which is, in fact, multilingual is also multicultural, and this is where we're going, I think, with the talk.
That is right. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I hope you find the presentation useful.
Oh, I'll bet I will. I'm looking forward to this a great deal. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sylvie's going to give us the talk in about 1 minute, but before she starts that, while she's sharing her screen, please do pop your questions in the Q&A. We'll have 5 or 10 minutes at the end to answer the questions. This will be really good fun. So, Sylvia, if you would share your screen, everybody else watching this, if you want to watch it back, there will be a recording that will be sent to you. And please do pop your questions in the Q&A. Thank you. Take it
Okay.
away.
Okay, perfect. So the most popular question of the year, I believe you can see my screen correctly, right? So I'll
Yes, we
just go
can.
ahead. Perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for everyone who showed interest in this presentation today. My goal will be to show you what you can focus on when you decide to start making your content available in new languages. That is, when expanding to new markets and reaching new audiences. Before we start, let me just briefly introduce myself, even though I've already been presented. So, my name is Silvina Nuñez. I am a Spanish translator from Argentina, specializing in SEO and international growth. And I'm also co founder of Optimational, which is a translation and multilingual SEO agency. By the way, I love connecting with other professionals in the marketing field, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And now, interesting fact. Did you know that most consumers prefer buying products in their language? Consumers are also more likely to pay more for products with information in their language. And this is one of the reasons why so many brands are starting to translate their content because of the many benefits of multilingual content. It helps build trust, increase brand loyalty, enhance user experience as users are more engaged with your content. It increases sales as there are more chances that a visitor will become a buyer. It increases the likelihood of being found organically on the global web, and well, many other benefits. And now that you know why multi-language content is important, let's talk about designing a strategy. So, what is a multilingual content strategy? We'll use this concept to refer to a marketing technique that includes the planning, the development, and the management of content in two or more languages. Companies that have a multi language strategy can better focus their efforts on reaching their international business goals and also on producing content that is consistent, valuable, and relevant to the target audience. Now, when creating your multilingual content strategy, there are three key steps to success. First, conduct research. You need and understand the market and the audience you're targeting. Second, set goals and metrics. This will allow you to measure your results and improve your strategy over time. And third, define the process requirements. These requirements are all related to the execution of the strategy. For example, one requirement will be to define what content you will be translating, what processes and workflows work best for you, or perhaps what assets and tools will you use. So, next, I'll expand on each one of these steps more in depth. So, we said that conducting research is one of the key steps when developing your multilingual content strategy. It's important to do research. Research reduces risk. So, the more you know about the market you're targeting and who you're selling to, the better you can plan. Now, when researching, focus on the market and the audience you're targeting. When you research the market, you can ask yourself things like, what business opportunities are there for my products or services? Is my pricing in line with what clients are willing to pay? Who are my competitors? What are their goals? What are their strategies? And when researching the audience, ask yourself things like, who will I be targeting? In what language? What are their motivations and goals? What are the best ways and channels to reach those audiences? What keywords do they use? Now, having a holistic view of the market and the audience will allow you to make data driven decisions. And this will have a positive impact on the results of your strategy. Now, there are many different resources you can use for your research, so to obtain data and insights. For example, you can conduct interviews or surveys to clients or to potential leads to better understand them. You can use websites and social media metrics to discover what products or services are more valued or more demanded by your target audience. You can check trade and economic statistics to get kind of like a general overview of how the market is doing. And you can use language industry research too. Companies such as Slater or Nimsy, they will give you a lot of insights into trends and market forces. And after you gather your research data, make an objective analysis and a conclusion. Determine if there is an opportunity to make an impact on that new market. If you determine that there is an opportunity, then go ahead and continue designing your multilingual strategy. If you conclude that it's not the right moment for a particular market, well, this may be a great chance to acknowledge and to overcome any potential threats or obstacles that you've identified. And if you're not sure, then Maybe you can test the waters and see if it's worthwhile, see what kind of results it gets. Okay, the second key step when developing a multilingual content strategy is to set the goals and metrics. Having defined goals and metrics will help you stay on track and align your opportunities with your business goals. First, you need to define the general goals you want to achieve. For example, from this multilingual content strategy, do you want to increase brand awareness, customer experience perhaps? Do you want to increase website engagement or sales? And after you define your general goal, you will need to define a specific goal. Unfortunately, just saying, I want to get more traffic isn't precise enough. Now, we will refer to this specific goal as a SMART goal. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Goals should be specific, they should be clear and tied to business objectives. Goals should be measurable and they should have specific KPIs, which I'll briefly talk about in a moment. Goals should be achievable and realistic based on your website authority, based on the resource you're dedicating, and goals should be time bound. Now, bear in mind that a multilingual content strategy is a long game. It can take a while to start seeing the results. So you must be thoughtful, you must be realistic about what you can achieve within a given time frame. Now, let's take a look at an example of a SMART goal. Increase organic traffic from Spain by 40% by the end of December 2022. This is a specific goal to achieve over a set time frame with a specific metric to determine success. See how specific we can get? Now, regarding KPIs or key performance indicators, which I'm sure most of you are already acquainted with this term. Now, remember that choosing KPIs to measure your strategy is very important. They are the data points that represent how the strategy is performing. Some website KPIs for measuring performance include the number of unique visitors, the number of downloads of a document or video, for example, the number of times a form was completed, the number of subscribers or likes and shares, and of course, there are a lot more. Now, the specific KPIs and numbers you determine will be based on your goals, your business, your website. Okay, the third step when developing a multilingual content strategy is to define the process requirements. This step entails defining the requirements concerning how or when you will execute your strategy. Some requirements that you will need to define include the scope and contents, the workflow, the tools, the assets, the stakeholders, and the budget. Now, I'll briefly go over each one of these requirements more in detail, starting with the scope and content. Basically, this entails deciding what content will be translated and what content will not require translation. Even though it will be awesome to translate everything at once, it's also a very expensive choice. So, here's a recommendation for you. Something you can do is conduct a content audit by creating a tally of every piece of content that you have. And in it, you can categorize each piece of content based on things like relevance to the new market, value to the project, value to the new target audience, based on the current organic traffic. So, what are the most popular pages? And with this information, you can decide what content you absolutely need to localize, what content can remain in the source language for the time being, what content may not be useful for your new audience. Okay, second requirement, define the processes. The processes that you will need to make your content multilingual. Basically, the processes will depend on the type of content you have, on your needs, on your resources. For example, you may require translation for your policies and for your legal documentation. You may require localization for your marketing material or for your email marketing. You may require subtitling if you have a video strategy in place. And once you define the processes, you will need to design a workflow for each process. Now, let's take a look at an example. This is an example of what a standard translation workflow typically looks like. First, a linguist translates the content. Second, a second linguist edits the translated content and then proofreads it. And finally, a QA check is performed. This last step is usually done by the client or the company project manager prior to its final publication. Now, as a recommendation, when you design your workflow, remember to be flexible. You don't need to use the same workflow with all your contents. You can use different workflows based on the type of content, on how much traffic that content is getting, on how important that content is, and you get the idea. For example, let's say you decide to translate your website. Something you can do is for the most important pages, such as the services pages, the About Us pages, or the best ranking pages, you could use a more complex workflow, such as the one here on the screen, which is a 4-step workflow, starting with keyword research, followed by translation, followed by editing, and finally QA. And for those other pages that aren't very important or that provide little organic search traffic, you could use a more simple workflow. For example, machine translation followed by just one step machine translation editing. And if you see that some pages which didn't rank so well before start performing better, then you can edit those pages to improve its quality. Another recommendation that I would like to make regarding the workflow is the importance of implementing SEO on your translated websites. I often see that companies spend a lot of time and money implementing an SEO strategy for their English websites, but not so much for their localized copies. So, great translation, great international copy, and great user experience will only serve you well if your potential clients are able to find your site. And this is where SEO comes in. International SEO is proven to work, it delivers results. And overseas SEO markets are still not fully exploited. So, including SEO as part of your multilingual content strategy can help you significantly increase your website traffic, your leads, your brand recognition, and reduce your advertising costs as you don't have to keep paying to be at the top. Now, international SEO is a very interesting topic and long one that I would love to talk about, but I don't have enough time to do so. So let me share with you just a few key ideas. Okay, aside from translating content and researching keywords, which is the most important SEO practice, some other things that you may want to consider include translating HTML tags, such as URLs, meta titles, meta descriptions, images, alternative text, and other attributes. Registering at local business portals, such as Google My Business or Bing Places, or other relevant high quality directories. This will help you create backlinks for your website and therefore your authority. And finally, remember to update internal and external links. This is a very important part of SEO as well. Okay, now going back to the process requirements, you should also define the tools that you will need to execute your multilingual content strategy. Some common tools include translation or CAT tools, which is what we call it. They will help you improve the translation results. They will help ensure consistency and reduce costs. To name a few, you can use MemoQ, you can use Stratos, or perhaps an online tool such as Margat. Next, the QA tools. They will help you improve and simplify the content quality processes. For example, tools such as Grammarly, which I'm sure most of you know, Yoast SEO plugin, which I personally love, or the Hemingway editor. They're great to QA content. And there are other tools such as Verifica or Xbench, which are great to QA translations. Okay, next, the SEO tools. They will help you facilitate the keyword research process and also the market research process. For example, Google Keyword Planner, Ubersuggest, SEMrush, and also bear in mind the content management system. That's the last tool here on the screen. The content management system you use will affect your multilingual content process. For example, WordPress or Contentful, they are very popular CMS that already have plugins that simplify the translation process. But there are other CMS that may need more manual work. So it's important to keep it in mind. Okay. Next, you should also define the assets, the company assets and the translation assets. Some of them may already be available, and you may need to create some of them from scratch. Some typical assets that are very useful include a company's mission, vision, and values, the brand's tone and voice, style guides, both for translation, style guides for translation, and style guides with the company's voice, glossaries, translation memories. Now, these assets or resources, they are very useful. They help ensure a consistent brand image, a consistent voice, and that the right message is conveyed and that the audience is addressed in the right way. Next, we'll need to define the stakeholders. So basically, who will be involved in some way in the strategy? Some key stakeholders in multi-language content strategies often include the in-house translator or perhaps the translation agency that you work with to produce content in new languages, the marketing manager, who is typically in charge of overseeing the strategy, the project manager, who's in charge of overseeing the execution of the strategy, and the web developer, who's usually in charge of the translation integration or the content publication. And last but not least, you will need to define a budget for your multilingual content strategy. Now, this is a very long topic, which I'm not going to get into it very much. But if it's too early, a detailed budget, perhaps you can review the project scope and the resources that you will need, and you can estimate that cost over a specific time frame. You can also talk to a few translation agencies and ask for quotes. Now, something that I would like to point out here is that great content does not come for free, and translation is expensive. Therefore, if your aim is to produce high quality content in new languages, it's given the importance it should, and a proper investment too. Now, after you've designed your multi-language content strategy, it's time to get the ball rolling. You're ready to execute your plan. And after you do, remember to evaluate the results. Remember to track, to measure, and to adjust your strategy over time. Doing so will help you reach your international business goals and make sure you use your investments wisely too. So, in other words, try to see your translation strategy as an ongoing process that is continuously improving over time. And now we've reached the end of the presentation. Thank you to everyone for listening. If, by the way, if anyone is interested in a free multilingual content strategy template, just send me a direct message via LinkedIn and I'll send it your way. And before we move to the Q&A session, I prepared a very quick poll for everyone. So if you could just take 1 minute and answer the poll, very, I'm much appreciated. Okay, the poll has been published.
All right. Can you
And
tell me where I can find the poll?
yes, you have to go to the chat section.
Yep.
On the chat, you will see public,
Mm-hmm.
and next to public, you should see polls.
Brilliant. Found it.
Found it. Good. Okay. If you want to take a look at it and answer it.
Right. Oh, is my website translated? If so, how many languages? Is it fully translated? And who translated my website? Those are the three questions.
That's correct. Yes. I would
Absolutely
love to
brilliant.
know what people are doing out there and what strategies they're using, how they're managing their multilingual content.
Oh, right. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at kind of multilingual content, and one of the major issues I found is the time it takes. I mean, as you said, you don't just translate, you need to adapt. And that requires the cultural understanding, which requires a native speaker who not only is a native speaker, but who understands the culture. I mean, for example, in Spanish, somebody from Argentina who speaks Spanish would not be appropriate for a Spanish site aimed at the Spanish Spain market. Would that be a fair assessment?
That would be a fair assessment, but the truth is that, ideally everybody wants to localize to reach the target audience the best way possible. But unfortunately, budget is a restriction.
Right.
So many times clients want to translate their content in a neutral or international way. And basically that can be done. So I'm a Spanish translator from Argentina, and I always translate content for the United States, for
Mm.
Spain. So that is possible. You can try to find kind of like a neutral tone to speak to everyone. But it's always best if you can localize it for the target audience. People just will feel more identified with your content.
Right. Okay. I mean, and the results for the polls are coming in, and in fact, right now, I mean, there are probably some more answers coming in, but 40% are saying their site isn't translated, which would suggest that of the 150 or so people here, you're looking at a good 60 people who are
Mhm.
planning to translate their website. I mean, I'm sure there must be lots of questions from those people about how do you go about it. I mean, you obviously explained it very briefly, maybe digging into specific details about aspects of that. I know that we created at CaliCube Pro, we have a SaaS platform, and we started off trying to do multilingual French and English because I'm in France and I speak French. And it proved to be more than twice the work. And that's a little bit like children. I'm told that when you have the second child, it's more than twice the work of the first child. Is that a fair assessment of that situation, that you should plan for more than double the work for the extra language?
Perhaps yes, but then the third child is going to be super easy, they'll just grow up.
Brilliant. And so
Yeah.
we've got 29% who have 2 to 5 languages. So that expansion beyond the second language is actually quite easy. It's that first language that's the big barrier that you need to break down. What are the typical mistakes people make or companies make when they're doing that first translation that makes the first or internationalization, rather, I should say, which makes the next steps more difficult? What should people look out for to make sure that that transition from 1 to 50 languages is simple?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that many people use machine translation, which
Mm.
I love, to be honest. I'm not against machine translation, even though many translators are. I think it's a great tool that makes your work easier. I've also read a lot of surveys that ask people whether they prefer to read content in their language, even if it's machine translated, and therefore they see errors in the content, and
Mm.
people agree. So I think that using machine translation is a common mistake in the sense that many companies just translate their content using machine translation, but they don't tell people that they're using machine
Right.
translation, and therefore someone goes to your site and they see this messy translation. They may see errors that they kind of make connection with your brands, and that's what we need to avoid. So this error can typically be avoided by adding a button that says machine translation, and that's it. People will voluntarily go and click on the button and see the machine translated content, and they'll be happy. So that will kind of do the trick. Now, this is one of the main issues I've seen. And another issue that I've seen is that sometimes people just begin the process, but they don't finish it. And that's okay. As I said, you don't have to have all your contents translated, but it's important to keep the most important content, your services, information regarding who you are, support, depending on your business model. So it's important to try to be consistent with how you manage your strategy.
Right. And talking about that, is it an option to do a partial translation, focusing on the post and bottom of funnel clients, or the clients and the very close prospects, and say, well, the rest of it I don't really need to do. I just need to focus on the people who are actually buying from me.
Yeah, certainly. You can use the sales funnel to focus what information you kind of translate. Certainly, that's one way to do it. And perhaps what you can do for the remaining content that you're not translating is just, add that button and make the content available, but tell them that the content that they're seeing is machine translated. That's definitely one way to go.
Right, and that machine translation idea, I mean, as you rightly say, if I see lots of mistakes on a page, I think less of the brand. But if it is
Exactly.
very clear that it's machine translated, I was thinking, oh, do you need a big pop-up? But you don't. You need to make the person take the action that translates it so they fully understand and aware of what they're getting into.
Yeah. Yeah, you can perhaps use the same button, that the one where we usually change languages from. So
Mm.
you have English, Portuguese, whatever. And you can indicate between brackets that I don't know, the four languages are machine translated. And, you're telling them what's happening. You're being completely honest. And that's something that customers value.
Right. Oh, so you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say that the simple fact that that there's a button that says their language, even if it's machine translated, people feel valued. They
Mm.
believe that you care about them. They realize that you care about them, and they value that. So I'm completely in favor of using this kind of resource.
Right. One of your questions, one of your poll questions asks who translated your website, and we have 33% who say it was a native speaker, 22% saying it's a freelance translator, um, 11% saying it's an agency, 4% saying machine translated. So maybe that will change after this talk, after what you just said. One of my questions was the consistency of the writing style, because within our own language, we can immediately see and we can maybe even control or at least direct our writers to write in a specific brand voiced style. Do you not have a problem with this, that the different languages might have different voices, and within one language, especially if you're using an agency or different freelance translators, that it might become a mess of different voices that don't make sense?
I have so many things to say about this. So let me
Off
just
you
try to
go.
do it. Yeah. So first of all, I noticed that many companies. I'm very sorry. Okay, I noticed that many companies, for example, work with people from their own team, someone that speaks the language within their team. Of course, this will help them save a lot of cost, but you can still use translation tools or CAT tools. There are many free tools that you can use, and these CAT tools are connected to a translation memory and to a glossary. And I won't get into detail into that, but that's what assures consistency. And
Right.
if you do that from the beginning, then everyone else who works, even if you work with perhaps a freelance translator for a while or with a company after, whatever you do, you'll have the translation memory to ensure consistency. It will depend a lot on the type of products that you offer, and the type of services that you offer. But it sometimes happens that translators usually may refer to a product in a different way.
Mhm.
One same term may have different translations, and when you as a user go into a website and find different translations for the same product, you may feel confused, and that may be one of the reasons why they're not choosing your brand and they may go with another. So consistency is definitely key, and there are a lot of resources to ensure consistency. I would certainly recommend using a CAT tool, a translation tool. And by the way, I briefly mentioned this during my presentation. There are a lot of CAT tools that are compatible with CMS, such as WordPress or Contentful. One of the CAT tools I mentioned, SmartCat. This is a free online cat tool. I mean, it has its paid version, of course. But for example, this is a cat tool that you can integrate with your website. And not only will it ensure consistency, but it will make your team's life easier. It's faster to work on. You'll get more repetitions. You don't have to continue thinking, oh, how did I translate this in the past? So it's important to use technology to assist your translations.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A, because in fact we've got quite a lot of questions. And Mariam Masood has asked, how important do you think it is to customize the visuals to adapt to the language? Or can one just use the same image for everybody?
Well, this is like all like a lot of the things that I said today, it depends. It depends on your resources. It depends on what you're offering, on what countries you're targeting. For example, here in Argentina, we're very used to seeing U.S. images, so like the United States, things related to the United States. But perhaps if we see an image that's coming from, I don't know, somewhere else in the world, we don't feel identified with the image. So
Mm,
it pretty much depends on that. But always, if you have the chance to localize, it's always best to try to localize visual things. Even colors sometimes represent different
right.
things on different cultures. So it's important to bear this in mind. That's a great question.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned colors. I remember somebody in France, who is a specialist in Baidu, was talking about the Chinese market, and red has a specific meaning in China, and I can't remember what it is, but I'm
Exactly.
probably wearing exactly the wrong shirt for a Chinese market. Next question is Bianco. Oh, I can't say that second name. Says Bosliai. Should we use more social media accounts than just one? I mean, I think the question is very kind of generic. I won't go into the details, but do you need a social media account per language and potentially in America, for example, per language, per country?
Okay, that same answer, it depends. But yes, I think that it's a great tool. I mean, if you continue creating content consistently, then yes, you can use another social media and have different social medias per language, especially if, for example, you have different offices around the world and
Mm.
different people are managing the different social media. They will publish different content, so you can publish them in the different social media. However, if you don't plan to continuously translate your social media content, then perhaps you can just use just one social media and have it bilingual or trilingual. Now, if you have more languages, then I would definitely recommend using more than one social media account.
Right, brilliant answer. And I'll add one thing is I specialize in knowledge panels and brand
Okay.
SERPs. And obviously, kind of we look internationally, and one of the big problems that Google has is to identify for multinational companies with different accounts in different countries, which social media account should be ranked on which brand SERP in which country, and also which knowledge panel. It changes the social media accounts it shows in the knowledge panel on the right-hand side. And that's a massive undertaking to manage because you need to educate Google about that, and most brands do it very badly. So that's an additional thing to bear in mind, that the wrong social media accounts may well be ranking in different countries if you do that. So you've got to be incredibly well organized and incredibly clear. Next question from Anthony. Should I get a local domain name?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into technical details here, but you should definitely have your own, for example, an extension of your website, such as .es, if you're translated into Spain. Perhaps you can remove the .com and use that extension, but certainly you should have one for your translated versions. You need to tell Google that that is a translated version of the original content.
Right. Okay. I mean, there is a whole big debate in the SEO industry whether you should use
Yes, a
subdomains,
lot. Mhm.
GOTLDs, or subfolders. And a lot of that comes down to, I mean, you're saying use the country TLDs because it's incredibly clear and people feel more comfortable. Amazon do it, Google do it themselves. But it does bring an extra
Exactly.
layer of complexity for managing the
Exactly.
different domains. So there's a
Yes.
technical issue that needs to be taken into account. Sorry.
And the size of your website too.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, I love all of this. Is it depends. How delightful. Uh,
It depends.
Mariam's asking, how do you manage the challenges of inaccurate translations with computerized translations? I mean, can you just use them to translate and then get a translator to just correct it, or is that an idiotic idea?
No, not at all. Machine translation has different results based on the language. I
Mhm.
always use Spanish as an example because I'm a Spanish speaker. Spanish, it's amazing. You get some results. You pretty much don't have to edit much. But there
Mm.
are other languages that the results aren't great. So it will depend. But you can certainly do that. You can assist the translator with a machine translation results and then have the translation what's called machine translation editing,
Mhm.
which is like just a one step editing that's conducted after the machine has translated. Of course, you won't get native results. It's going to be just like kind of a standard translation, but it works.
Right. And so it's actually been upvoted twice, and I think it was probably upvoted twice for can you recommend the most accurate translation tool?
No, I can't because it will vary a lot based on the language. But for example, DeepL, DEEPL, is awesome for German, for Spanish, for French, Italian, and then perhaps for Asian languages, Google Translate is a better option.
Right, brilliant. Okay, and we have another question from Goda. How do you keep a company's voice but also adapt to the new market's needs?
Okay. Um, Regarding the voice, you may want to keep the same voice as in the original market, and that's okay. That's one way to do it. or you may find the need to adapt it. You may want to approach audiences in a different way. So this is part of the research that you'll conduct while you're designing your strategy. This is why it's important to work with native people
Mm.
that can assist you and tell you, these I don't know, this audience preferred to be spoken in perhaps a more brief way, or this culture prefers this way. So that's something to bear in mind during the strategy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Golda's mentioning the fact that American culture tends to be friendlier than European culture,
Yes,
and a European
exactly.
might be ill at ease. And I mean, in the English, in particular, English and American English, we all think, oh, it's just small spelling differences, but it's actually also the attitude, which
Yeah.
is delightful. Right. One last really quick question from Mila, which is clarification. Are those workflows CRM automated, or are they kind of working team department workflows?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the
Well, the
question? I don't know if I understand it.
workflows CRM that you showed during your talk, are they
Okay.
automated, or are they simply the ways the team work together?
Uh, So the workflow that I showed is just an example of one way to handle, for example, a
Mm,
translation. And if you use a CAT, so a translation tool, you can certainly automate that. You can, just create the kind of workflow you want, who you want to assign for each task, etc. But you can always adapt it based on your needs. I don't know if that
brilliant.
answers the question.
It does, yes, exactly. I
It
think that
does.
was just the clarification of saying, and well, in fact, it's define how you want to work, get your workflow, use a cat if you can to make that workflow function for you. So that was absolutely delightful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the talk. I really enjoyed the Q&A afterwards. It was slightly longer than I expected, but we had lots of great questions and the polls were amazing. So that was amazing. And thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Silva.
Okay, thank you so much. Hope you everyone finish enjoying the conference, and I look forward to talking to you. Have a great
And
day.
thank you so much. And we're going to now take a break. We'll be back in an hour with the next session. Please do join us. And don't forget that we have the rest of the day ahead of us to enjoy with two more amazing talks that I'm deeply looking forward to in the brand session afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. See you in a moment.